Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the One Tough Day podcast. I'm your host, Steve Van Horn. I am super excited about every episode, but particularly excited about today's episode. With me, I have corporate M&A attorney, professional sports agent, a world traveler, Joe Rosen. I got to know Joe through our corporate M&A relationship as we started doing some larger deals. Got introduced to Joe. We were actually vetting M&A attorneys, Chad and I. And as soon as I met Joe, I said, he's the one. That's the guy. I want him. So there was no negotiation on the fee schedule or anything. We just hired him. And it has been awesome getting to know Joe. I know he's on our side. And this is something we talk about a lot on this podcast as I give a long introduction to Joe here, but building out your team. And man, Chad and I are so blessed. We have the best support team in the country. I would put our support team up against anybody. And Joe has become a huge part of that as our corporate M&A attorney, representing deals that, are in the tens of millions of dollars. And he's a bulldog. Don't mistake him today as you see how kind and awesome he is. He is a vicious bulldog. Multiple times I've been on calls with him where we've hung up and I've said, like, man, I just want mom and dad to get along. He's like, this is attorneys getting along. So but he's got so many cool stories. So we chatted last week and I said, man, you got to come on the podcast and tell us some of these stories. I joke with him that he is the most interesting corporate M&A attorney in the world. And he says, well, the bar has been set pretty low. But Joe, so that people can get to know you a little bit more, why don't you give a quick background of who you are, where you're from, how you got into M&A law, being a sports agent, and some of those details.
Absolutely. So it's great to be here, Steve. I really appreciate it. It's been fantastic getting to know you over the last year or so, you and Chad. So, yeah, I grew up near Philadelphia in Wilmington, Delaware. I went to Syracuse for, Syracuse undergrad. I was a broadcast journalism major. I wanted to be the next Bob Costas, as everybody does, who, goes to Newhouse at Syracuse. I quickly realized there were a lot of people who wanted that a lot more than I did. And I kind of, changed my tune. And I'll tell you, a little funny story about kind of how I decided not to go into broadcasting. I was sports all the time when I was in college and when I was in high school. I'm 52 years old. When I was at Syracuse, there was an opportunity. A lot of people went abroad, right? And I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. They had this thing called the Washington Semester Program at American University. I went there in the spring of 93 when Clinton was inaugurated. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go somewhere. It's not going to be sports. It's going to be politics, something else. So I went down there in the spring of 93. I worked at an all-news radio station, WTOP. Great place. People know it. I basically was a radio, I did radio stories. I just couldn't go on air. What's that?
Like a DJ? Like you were
No. Like it was an all-news radio, like a news reporter, basically.
Okay.
Like but I couldn't go on air because it was a union station, but I went, I interviewed, I did everything else. At the end of the semester, I'm a sophomore in high school. At the end of the semester, they come up to me and they said, Joe, you were great. You were awesome. We'd like to hire you in 2 years when you graduate college. Here's the starting salary. I'm not going to say what it is because it's like, it's just not. And I said, at that point, I'm going to law school. I mean, it was just like an instantaneous thing. Like, I can't start at this salary, and plenty of people do in the broadcasting industry. So when I went back to Syracuse, I decided, all right, I'm going to go, I want to be a sports attorney or work in that world. Applied to law school, got into Boston College Law School. I wanted to be in a big city. Went right from college to law school, was on the Sports and Entertainment Society there, interned for a football agent, had a lot of debt coming out of law school, as most people do, and so I went to work for a big firm. I did big law for 8 years. I started at a firm, Testa, Hurwitz, and Tebow, which was a huge firm in Boston. It's no longer around. Dick Testa died. We were talking about succession plans before this thing. Dick Testa died and the place imploded. I mean, that's really what happened with Testa Hurwitz. It's a little more complicated than that, but for the most part, I left Testa before that happened, and went to a firm, Goulston and Stores. It's a big real estate firm in Boston, had a corporate practice, had some great mentors there. When I was a third-year associate, the Red Sox were sold, and it was like a bidding war from some groups in Boston. John Henry's group obviously ended up getting the team, but there were a client of Goulston who we ended up representing in that sale, and they came in second. So I got to work as a third-year associate on that team. I really forced my way onto that.
Taste of professional sports negotiating, litigation?
Anything. Yeah. And I wasn't really even involved in the negotiation. I was, 27 years old. It had every managing partner on the deal, all the tax people. I was reviewing the baseball contracts, which is the coolest thing in the world, right? Like
What
as a
was the
third
size
year
of that deal?
associate, 700 million.
700 million.
Yeah. And
What
I
would
mean,
it be
that's
today?
in the billions, like
Well into the
significant,
billions.
well into the billions. So I was like the baseball guy on the deal, and I use that term loosely. Like it was we went into room like you couldn't. You know how we've done diligence on our deals, right? Like everything is electronic. It's in drop boxes and things like that. Back then, this is 2001. You could still do some stuff electronically, but the sellers wouldn't allow it. So every bidding group and their lawyers had like 2 days where they would come into their law firms. They had a room, and there were folders all over the place, and you could look at whatever you want and write down whatever you want, but you couldn't copy anything, you couldn't get email copies, you couldn't do that. And you had to make a decision on what to bid and what terms to offer based on what was in this room. It was crazy. So I had all the baseball contracts, and Dan Duquette was the general manager, and Manny Ramirez was on this team, and Pedro, and all these guys. And so I'm sitting there writing down, and just furiously. So they didn't get the team. They tried to buy the Celtics. They didn't get them either. So at that point, I'm like, well, I'd love to do the sports thing a little bit. And I went around to everyone at Golston. I just said, can I build a sport? Can I build a sports practice? And they all said, yeah, if you can do it, you can do it. It ended up being about 10 to 15% of my practice when I was there. And I met some really interesting people, but I really wanted to do since we didn't get the Red Sox and we didn't get the Celtics, I really wanted to do the player side. And the player side and law firm side doesn't really mix. Player side is commission based, law firm side is hourly based, as you know. So I ended up leaving and setting up my own companies. Brown and Rosen, which is still my law firm, it's been since 2005. And I had my own agency called Orpheus Sports from 2005 to 2016. Initially, Steve, when I set up my law practice in '05, because I had been a corporate M&A lawyer. I did venture fund financings, IPO, public securities work. I mean, I did everything when I was at Testa and Goulston. When I initially set up in '05, I said, I'm only going to do the law practice as long as I need to until I make enough money through the agency. And here we are 20 years later, and I love the law practice. I'll be honest, I didn't love the law practice when I was working at big firms. I just wasn't a big firm guy. I don't know. I don't really have a reason for that, but that changed very quickly.
Well, I think
Even when I merged Orpheus into Icon in 2016,
you
my
love the
corporate
sports side,
practices thrive. I do.
but you've also said that the corporate M&A pays the bills, right?
It pays the bills, it pays the bills, but I also love it. I love deals. I think that's it. I think like if you take the M&A side and some of the baseball contracts I do, they're deals,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And it's the similar rush and thrill of a beginning, middle, and end of a baseball contract of, of an acquisition. They're very similar. So it's different, right? Because you're representing players for a long period of time and they have multiple contracts. A lot of times when you're representing a seller of a business, there's only one sale. Sometimes there's multiple sales, but a lot of the times there's, just one sale, right? So it's a little different, but it's still the rush of a deal that really gets me and has always gotten me.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so interesting because when I talk to you, there's a couple things that really impressed me about you, Joe. And I knew we would hit it off the second we met. Like I said, we pretty much stopped the vetting process immediately and called Justin and those guys said like, "Hey, we're done. We got Joe." He was like, "Good," because we like working with Joe too. So we're done really well. But your follow up and your interest was something that stood out to me. Where when you work with some attorneys, it feels so cold, and you're such a relationship driven guy. I think back to when we first met and started interacting, like I don't think more than a week or so has gone by in a year where you haven't just floated me a random text and said like, "Hey, how you doing? I just wanted to check in. How's everything going? Anything you need from me?" And to me, that's so impressive from an attorney, not to stereotype attorneys here, but
Sure.
um,
You can. It's
a lot of
fine.
attorneys are more cold. Yeah, I can. It's fine. and they don't have that relationship side, which I'm sure that's what also makes you a great sports agent. But you're juggling so many things, and I know that because I talk to you enough that you're always like, yeah, I'm jumping on a plane to Dubai, and I'm going to play around the golf with Michael Jordan, and then I'm going to fly back to the West Coast. And I'm obviously exaggerating a little bit, but you live such an interesting life. I'm like, that's cool that as you get ready to board a plane in Texas, you're shooting me a text just to check in, see how things are going. And I know one thing about you is if I say like I need this, you're on it like now. Like I'll text you back, and then within like 5 minutes, I'm seeing an email I'm copied in on to 12 people saying like, can we please get this, da 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 da. So it's so impressive to me. How do you manage that? Having all these pots in the fire, making sure that your players that you represent, I know, how many players do you have right now under contract?
So I have about 20 professional guys and about a handful of draft guys for each year. So it's manageable. I always say this, like I'm a full-time baseball agent, but I just take less players so I can be a full-time lawyer as well, right? So like I don't say I'm a part-time this, part-time that. You can do multiple things, right? You do multiple things. I mean, a
Sure.
lot of the people that you're talking on this podcast does multiple things, right? Like I'm in I've taught entertainment law at Boston College Law School for 20 years. I'm teaching a class in LA in about a month for Syracuse Law School on sports and entertainment law for a week, a residency out there. I think you could do multiple things. I think it's just how you manage your time, right? And I think that a lot of the most successful people, I'm not saying that I am, but like I'm saying, are able to manage their time very efficiently. And so I have prided myself, and I think it's one of the things I said to you, before you hired me, is that I agree. Most lawyers are, not 9 to 5 or whatever, especially you can't be on a deal. But I pride myself in my communication, how I communicate, what I communicate about. I'd like to remember everything. Like, for example, if one of my players says, I have a live bullpen, right? Bullpen again, throwing a bullpen against hitters. For people that don't know what that is, on Saturday, I'll write it down and I'll put a note in my calendar and say, check in with so and so, on Saturday after the live BP and let them know how it is, right? And so the communication has always been a thing. And there are times, I think we've talked about this in passing too, is even at night, if I'm watching a show with my wife, if I get bored a little bit, because, watching a show that she prefers, over me. My wife loves the show The Pit on HBO. It's cool. It's fine. It's not my thing. I watch it with her, but I'm thinking, right? I'm like, all right, who can I text right now? Who need, what I mean? Like, how can I keep those relationships?
And see,
But
that's it. That's so it's
yeah,
that cognizant, like it's a conscious effort to make that contact, right? I know
correct.
for years I struggle with like I would think about people, especially people within our business, but I wouldn't necessarily let them know I was thinking about them, right? And it's like a trick, like, hey, if I'm thinking about them, I'm sure they would appreciate the fact that like I have a question or whatever. Maybe it was a coworker whose kid was having a surgery that day, and I knew about it. And I'm sitting in bed at 9 o'clock at night, wondering like, I wonder how the surgery went. Like I've learned from people like you, Joe, like just send the text, ask,
Yeah,
like, hey man, was thinking about you. Like just be extremely honest, right? And vulnerable. Like, hey, I was laying in bed thinking about you. I'm curious how that surgery went today. And that goes a long way. I know, especially in the last year, as we're doing some pretty big deals together, Joe. Like that meant a lot to me because there were some times when you text me where I would be like, man, I kind of needed somebody to get in my headspace because I wasn't in the best spot. While the business, I'm always like even keel, right? Like we don't see the water swirling below the surface. I try to always be pretty, pretty steady up top, I guess, for the strength of the team.
right.
Below, sometimes it's pretty rough, right? And you would send me a text, I'd be like, got a second for a call? And I think about my wondering spot. For those that don't know, if I'm at home, I go out to my garage. I have a big detached garage at my house. And I just wonder. I do laps around the cars and I start
Mhm.
organizing my toolbox. Well, I'm on the phone venting people. So that's why sometimes you would hear things clanking around probably in the background. I remember multiple times you'd be like, yeah, I'm available. It'd be like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And I'm out there ranting at you like mad about something, right? But it was super cool because I would get it off my chest. And sometimes by the time I would go to bed, I was wound down significantly better. But I can't tell you how many times I would hang up the phone with you and think like, man, I think you had told me at one point you're representing like 25, 30 different players with the prospects. I'm like, that's so cool that those people feel important. I know I'm not your only corporate a client. You have a lot of
Mhm.
those as well. Like this ability to make each one of those people feel important because they all are extremely important to you. I feel that that's a gift, and that's something that you're very good at. So putting reminders in your phone? What other tools and tactics do you use that listeners might find helpful so that they can manage that balance of, not being all over it, I guess, but also making everyone feel as though they're important and valued in their relationship with Joe?
I think it's, I'm a very visual person, so I like things to be on paper, in folders, things like that. So I have a lot of lists. I have a to-do list every day. I have a list of all my baseball clients, a list of all my baseball prospects, a list of my legal clients. I have a lot of folders that are labeled specifically that I go back to, right? Like sometimes you get really busy. If I'm in the middle of the deal, you may not, if I'm in the middle of the deal, then someone who I closed a deal for, a year ago may not hear from me for a while, right? That type of thing.
Yeah.
But when I do have time, when that deal closes or when I'm in the middle of something or even on a weekend or whatever, I go back to those folders or those lists and I say, all right, who haven't I reached out? Like on my baseball list, for example, Steve, I have the last time I talked to each player, the last time I texted with each player.
There's like
And
a
I don't,
file. You have like a player file where you put all that in there?
yeah, it's like a Word document. It
That's
just
great.
says like, current players, this draft class, or whatever, and it says so and so talked this date, texted this date. You know what I mean? Because I want to make sure that I don't go an extended period of time. And I don't do that with all the legal clients, right? Once a deal closes, you don't need to hear from me like every day, that type
You
of
close
thing.
deals for me and you still text
Oh,
me?
oh, I know, absolutely, 100%. But probably, but not as often as I will like someone who I'm, currently working on, that
Yeah,
type of
right.
thing. But I get, you know, I mean, it's a selfish thing, right? Like, I mean, it's not all selfish. Like, this is how I think, but selfishly, like, I get most of my referrals from people who have been satisfied with my services, right? So, like, I have a good relationship with a couple brokers. I've gotten, I did one HVAC sale in December of 2021, and that has led to representing 20 to 25 HVAC sellers, not just HVAC in the service business over the last 4 or 5 years. And they have all been the sellers saying, use Joe, he's great. He did this for me. And some of the things you've said make me feel really good. Like you saying I'm a bulldog. Like I want people to think that. Like I don't come across that way. Like, and people watch this podcast are not going to be like he's a bull. They're just not
I
going to
didn't
do
see that
that.
side of you yet, but I
Right.
remember multiple times where I would call you and be like, "Am I being unreasonable, Joe? Am I being unreasonable?" You'd be like, "No, I'm fighting for you on this."
Absolutely, and I think it's important to do that. So I think it is important um, to keep things organized and efficient. And I don't know, Steve, I don't know how you are, but I am a zero email inbox guy. Like I can't
What do
function.
you know me now for a year? What do you think I am?
I think you're a zero email inbox guy too. It goes to
I've got 3 emails right now that are unread because we've been sitting here for 10 minutes.
That's it. I put them in folders. I put notes in my calendar. I think like that. But I don't like it when emails are in my inbox because I feel like I haven't dealt with an issue, and I don't want to. I don't want that to happen.
And I know people who manage their email box kind of like, hey, I check it once a day or twice a day. I think
Yeah.
you're like me. Like if you send me an email, a text, or a phone call, it's the same response. If
Correct.
email, I'm going to look at instantaneously, just like a text message. The thing I started doing when I was probably 27, when I started going from like 10 emails a day to hundreds of emails a day, is I created a simple system, right? If it's something that doesn't require any response from me, meaning I don't need to know about it, whatever, then I just delete it.
Yeah.
Real simple. It's junk email. It doesn't really involve me. There was some simple thing in there, but I don't need any documentation of that email to stay on record. I just delete it. It's gone now. Boom, get it out of here. If it's something that I feel like there's important something in there, maybe it's a mention of something or numbers in there that I need to keep on file, I read it. I don't do anything with it. I don't need it, right? But then I have all these other subfolders created in my
Hmm.
Outlook inbox, right? And I have, by the way, 7 emails, as you've learned, right, for every
Yeah.
company. And then my catch-all email that people be like, a Gmail address, Steve? I'm like,
Yeah.
I know. I could do Steve at Simpson, Steve at Bonsky, Steve at Koblenz, Steve
Right.
at, like, you pick it. But so if it's something that belonged as, like, for example, when we do deals, I'll have them flagged, right? And if it's something that's part of that deal, then I dump it in that folder if I feel like I need to retain it so I can go find it later. If it's something that could be a quick response and now it's done, then I just respond right then and there. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a matter of me going and finding an answer, me making a quick phone call to get the answer, then reply all, right? Like I just do it now and then it's done. And that way I don't have this like list of things that build up so that it becomes like this juggernaut thing by the end of the day where I'm like, oh, I got so much to do and I'm so far behind. Like I'd rather just deal with it and stay caught up all day. And
I
I do
agree.
use the flag system. So what my rule is, like if I'm driving, yes, I do sometimes. I have a car that helps me with that, right? Make sure I don't get too
Mm-hmm.
far off the road. But if I'm driving and I know it requires that I go in and get additional information I can't get right now, then I use the flag system. I literally just tap flag, and then as
Mm-hmm.
soon as I get my computer out, my MacBook Pro, I go and I sort my emails by my flags, and I
Mm-hmm.
start chipping away. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, I owe them an attachment that I knew was saved to my desktop. Attach it. Go. I needed to upload that to Dropbox. Upload it. Boom. Now I can delete that one or flag it as red or unflag it. Right. So it makes life so much simpler. And I think for me, you share this characteristic. Like we almost get a certain amount of anxiety when that work
Uh-huh.
up and is unresolved, right? And it helps to keep my anxiety down. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that 100%. It does. Like I don't like it every night before I go to bed. I come to my computer in my office and I clear it. You know what I mean? Like there's some things I can, right? If I get an email, I just did after I closed one of your deals, I had two West Coast deals after that. So the lawyers I was dealing that on those deals were in like Portland, Oregon and
That's
California and things like that, right? So in that situation, it's hard for me to clear everything at night, right? Because I'm getting emails at midnight and whatever, right? That type of thing. So, but in those situations, when I wake up, they're asleep, so I can deal with that in the morning. But if I'm not dealing with that type of deal, I try to clear all emails unless there's something significant, right? I got a document at 7 o'clock that's a 30-page document. I can't clear that. That's something I got to deal with for a period of time. But the emails you're talking about, the little responses, those types of things, I try not to leave those until the morning.
Yeah, and that's such a skill because as you scale things, as you take on more clients, you're working multiple corporate M&A deals at one time.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have that skill, you're quickly going to either have to invest in a personal assistant or someone to keep it managed, but you're a control freak. That's
Yeah.
my fear
It's
because
hard to
people
do.
you're just like, you should look at hiring an assistant. I'm like, oh, I don't want to take my eyes off everything.
I
Like, well,
know.
I don't have to be in control of everything. I love to be aware of everything. And I
Right.
never want it to be a situation where it's like, well, we didn't bring that to you because, and I'm like, no, I can't deal with that. I could just be as efficient as possible through having some good processes in place that will allow me to kind of scale it. Now, at some point, I'll probably need some help, but at this point, not too much slips through the cracks. Another cheat code I have is I check my missed calls before the end of the workday every day. And
Yep.
if I see it's someone who I didn't have a chance to call back or text back, then I try to get with them by the end of the day. Sometimes the end of the day for me might be 6, 7, depending on the relationship I have with you. I might
Mm-hmm.
even call 8, 9 o'clock at night because I know it's better for you too after the kids are settled and families had dinner, and I'll call you back usually. So, but I want people to know, like, if I call Steve and I haven't heard from him, he's going to call me back at some point today. Every now and then I'll have to call him the next morning and say, like, hey, I'm really sorry.
Right.
You know, I shoot for the end of the day, didn't make it, but I saw you called me yesterday at 3. I'm going to call you back. But I think that sets a tone with your team and with your business partners and allies that, like, hey, I'm accountable. And it also sets an expectation that I expect the same in return, right? Like when I call you, when I text you, I do expect a response or to be made aware of why you didn't respond and when I can expect your response. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think that the only time, and my wife is not happy about this characteristic of me, but the only time I don't answer the phone is when I'm in a meeting,
Yeah.
when I'm on a podcast, right? Like those, when I'm talking to someone else, right? Like there are very few times when I'm talking to someone. I don't want to say never because some things are more urgent than others, right? Like they just are. But for the most part, if I'm talking to someone, and I walk back and forth. Like you say, you go to your garage. My office is right outside my bedroom. So this has actually helped me lose weight too, which has been great. Is that I used to take all my phone calls just like in my office or on my couch or whatever, and now I just pace back and forth when I do it. My wife doesn't like that either because she's right under it. But it helps me do that. So if I'm on a call and someone else calls in while I'm on the call, I don't answer that call and I'll text them and I'll say I'm on a call and I'll call you back as soon
Yep.
as I can, that type of thing, right? But very rarely do I not answer. Very rarely do I leave a missed call for the next day. I try not to do that, and I think that's an appealing thing. I think like one of the things that I sell about myself when I do deals, like any corporate work, not
Yeah,
just deals, but any corporate works, right?
I heard
Is that
you set that expectation. Like I will be available. I'll be extremely responsive. And I was like,
yeah, like
yeah,
I'm an agent, and if I have, if I have a baseball player call me who and I don't answer and I don't get back to them, well, I'm going to lose that baseball player, right? Like I'm going to, like it happens, right? I'm not a big agency. We're not a small agency. We're not a big agency. So like, I don't want to even risk that. Like that's it. So I operate my law practice the same way I do my, the baseball
well,
side.
what do you
So
think the assumption of a player would be if they're trying to get a hold of you and you're not responding to them? What do you think their assumption would be?
they just think I'm not interested, right? They just think I'm not paying attention or I'm not doing my job. And it's
Right.
just,
And how do you respond to the people who maybe you're interested in them? Right.
right.
Like, if Joe doesn't
Right.
respond to my calls. What about the people who are wanting NIL deals with me or who are interested in drafting me? Like, is Joe responding to them? Right.
Absolutely. It's funny I think, we've talked about this from March 9th to 12th, and I'm like super anxious and nervous about this for maybe not the best reason, but I've taught entertainment law at Boston College Law School for 20 years. I've done it in the fall. It's 5 to 7 on Wednesdays. I've done it a whole bunch of times. There's no anxiety. I love teaching, Steve, like I really do. Like I love it.
Yeah.
Um,
No, me too.
and I get excited about it, right? It doesn't pay a lot, and that's fine, but I love doing it. Syracuse Law School asked me to teach this sports and entertainment law residency in Los Angeles from March 9th to 12th. I live in Boston, outside Boston. So I'm doing this, and it's all day. It's 9 to 5, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and 9 to 1 on Thursday. That's 4 days that I'm not going to be able to talk to anybody, right? Because I got dinners afterwards and things like that. So the week before, like I've told all my players, I've told all my clients about this, but people forget. Like I forget stuff. I text players who are on vacation all the time, and they're like, "Hey, I'm in Aruba." I'm like, "Yeah, you told me. I forget." I would rather be over texting than under texting. All right, so
Of
that's
course.
okay. But I have like this build up anxiety about that week in March that like something's going to happen on a deal, something, somebody's going to get hurt, somebody's going to give up 8 runs, like whatever, something's going to happen and I'm not going to be there. But the good news is it's in Los Angeles, so I'll have that time before 9 a.m. to deal with it, right? And that type of thing. But it's still, it's going to be 3.5 days where I'm going to be effectively unavailable. And that,
You might
even
have
on
to do water
vacations,
break.
I'm not like that.
You might have to do some water breaks during your
I'm gonna
call.
have to. Well, I did set breaks in between just so I can check my phone once in a while to see what's important.
Yeah. Real quick, and I know you got some awesome stories I want to make sure we get to, so I don't want to spend too long, but I appreciate you sharing some of these knowledge and skills that I think could help business owners, entrepreneurs as they try to juggle many different things at one time, which is pretty much a necessity of being a business owner. But one of the things I appreciated the most about you is early on, you said we went through this like, hey, let's get to know each other and make sure that we can work well with each other. And I said, like, hey, one thing I need from you is sometimes people say I'm intimidating or they don't feel open, right? So just know, like, I want you to check me. If
Mm-hmm.
something I'm asking is unreasonable, if you think I'm, and there was a couple times in a big deal we did where I remember the one time you called me, you said, "Hey, you said that I should check you if you're asking for something unreasonable, right?" I was like, "Yeah, did I do that?" You're like, "Yeah, yeah, you did." Do you remember that conversation? I think it was
I,
2 times we had to have conversations like that.
well, I think the first thing we ever did, it wasn't that early in the deal, but it was like a month in, and we didn't see eye to eye on something, and that's fine. Like you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like that's not going to happen. And I didn't like the way that we ended the call, right? Like I just didn't like the way we ended the call.
yeah.
And I think I texted you or I called you afterwards, and I'm like, I'm sorry if I went overboard, and you're like, Joe, you don't have to apologize. My feelings aren't going to be hurt. I want you to tell me where it is, right?
I
And
remember
there
that.
are, yeah, and then there was, and then there's the time you're referring to where I think we were on a Zoom with everybody,
Yeah,
and you were focused on this one issue. And I was texting you during it. I'm like, Steve, don't worry about it. Steve, don't worry about
Calm
it. But
down.
like
This
you're,
is a corporate
yeah,
thing. It's all good.
right. Yeah, and those types of things. But I think it's important. I think like I've been when I was in a law. I think this is what's helped me in the last 20 years. You know, being a lawyer, not just being but like being a lawyer for 8 years. And I went right from college to law school, right? Like I graduated law school when I was 24. You know, I left Golston when I was 32. So, you know, I was very young. I didn't have any real jobs before, you know, like the only jobs I had before my first law firm job were delivering pizzas and waiting, you know, waiting tables and real jobs, but like nothing in the, you know, nothing in the professional field, right? So, when I went there, like I had to learn how to work for someone. I had to learn how to be a lawyer. And the things that I didn't learn at the law practice that I've learned in the last 20 years is how to be an entrepreneur because I am too, right? Like you know, having my own business, I'm an entrepreneur as much as I am an attorney. And when you're working at a law firm, you're not an entrepreneur, right? So
Right.
you're just doing the job. And so there are things that I look out
Which by the
now.
way is a great way to learn. You needed
I think,
that
oh,
too.
at
That's
100%.
extremely important part of your career and growth, right?
100%. And so, like, for example, and you know, and I think this is one of the things we talked about, you know, early on a deal was when I'm looking at an acquisition agreement, when I was at, you know, my firms, and again, no, this is what lawyers do, they're so hell bent on the reps and warranties, right? And this is a conversation we had, right? Because one of the deals we did, the reps and warranties, the disclosures were just so extensive. And I'm like,
Which,
Steve,
by the way, like real quick, for people who
yeah,
haven't been through this process of doing like M&A, like we had done some small deals on our own in the past where it's like a 4-page contract. Like
right,
things are insane. We're talking 40 some page contracts, the disclosure, you already mentioned due diligence.
yeah,
Like, holy cow, as the deals have gotten bigger, like the due diligence is insane. And you just got to realize like the bigger the transactions, the more the due diligence. And as
absolutely.
someone who says like I have the best team ever representing me, I don't know if you remember this phone call, but I called you one day. I said I literally couldn't sleep last night, and I pulled out the
Mhm.
40-page contract and I read every single word and I
Yep.
redlined it and I have questions. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. I do remember that. Yes.
And surprisingly, I actually understood enough to catch some things that I was like, "Can you look into this?" You're like, "That was a good catch." I'm like,
Yeah,
don't know what half the words in that sentence meant, but I think I know enough to know I don't like where it's going. And it's just
absolutely.
it's such an involved process that it's really easy to kick the can on it, but it's really important that you not right kick the can just because you have a corporate attorney. And we had the benefit of having a great local attorney team. We've used
Yeah.
Katie and Jim Contini, and like those guys dug into some of the real estate details of some deals we've done, and they've done a lot for us in the past. But like you know the deals have gotten bigger like when they get into the you know you're quickly approaching tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars of deals like you need someone who does this all the time and has seen this language in these contracts and knows what the expectation is because where you're going with that conversation is like some of this any local attorney probably would have been very concerned with. But the
Right.
piece of and you could give is like, hey, I've done these deals.
Hmm.
Don't that's not the you don't want to die on that hill.
Right.
There's other hills in this contract that are worth dying on. And that's not one because it's going to be a moot point at the end of the day. And that's where you really have a strategic advantage as someone who's been in the industry and done these deals with certain investors and certain private equity groups, right? Especially as you get into the big investors like Goldman Sachs and some of these big dogs, and you know what the intent is versus exactly the way it's written in the contract, right?
Absolutely. And I think like you know, there's all this, there's a lot of boilerplate in every contract, right? And certainly in an acquisition agreement and things like that. And I think like early on, I got wrapped up in governing law and, you know, those things are important. I'm not saying they're important. They're certainly important in like $1 billion merger, right? I mean, you want Delaware law in $1 billion merger. But reps and warranties, for example, you know, when you're selling a business, you have to make all these representations about your company and what you've done and what you haven't done. And if there's an exception to what you're representing to, you have to list it. You know, you have to list it in the disclosure schedules. Well, in 1999 or 2002, it was a lot. There was no Dropbox, like there was none of that, right? Now everything can be like done. You know, you can I say, Steve, we need a list of inventory. You can do it in 10 minutes, right? Like it's
Right.
very quick. So it's actually just reps and warranties is just producing documents, which sometimes is annoying when you're asked to do it multiple times,
In
the same
different
thing.
formats.
Right. It's annoying. But what I really care about in these deals, the most thing, there's other things I care about. I'm a lawyer, so I'm going to be annoying like a lawyer sometimes. But one time, I want to make sure you get paid, and I want to make sure your liability is limited. Those are the two things above all that I care about. And I care about, I mean, look, if a representation is, unreasonable, or, I hate when lawyers say it's not typical or standard. I just did a deal I closed in January where I had a lawyer who was, I mean, I've been practicing for, 30 years. She was, I think, a third year, and she was telling me what's standard. And I'm like, well, please don't. And no, it's not. Right. So,
We got a couple of those through our
right.
you're like, guys, no, like
Yeah.
we had to involve a third party attorney for one little thing. I remember you're like, Steve, like, I don't even feel like having this conversation right now. It
No,
wasn't me, by the way. And
no, and I
I
don't
like
think.
handle them.
Right, and I don't like that answer anyway. I don't like it when another lawyer says that this is standard, because it's, standard is it's a subjective concept. It's not an objective concept, right? But I want to make sure you get paid. I want to make sure your liability is limited. If I'm able to accomplish those things, we've won the deal, no matter what else anything else says.
Yeah. And one thing that I'll give you so much credit for, and then we're going to ask the tough day question. So get ready for that, because I know you got a
Yeah.
couple you've been mulling over, and I intentionally said, don't tell me what they are. So I want
Yeah.
to hear organically for the first time, although I know the gist of the one at least, because we've talked about it before. But one thing that's really important to have someone that knows their stuff when you're doing any sort of deal like this these days. Like when we were buying $100,000 pieces of real estate, like there's only so much there, right? Like, and your liability is already pretty minimal, and worst case scenario, you dump it, and like, it is what it is. But as the deals get bigger, like, you develop somewhat a tunnel vision. There's times where there were things that were so important to me that I didn't even realize what I wasn't thinking about. And I
Hmm.
know there was a couple pieces, especially in the 11th hour, you brought to me, like, this should be in there. This should be in this contract. This should, and I was like, holy shit, like, that's really important. And I was so focused on what was in front of me, I didn't even think about the things that weren't there at all. Right.
Right.
And that's where you brought a ton of value to say, like, hey, we need to make sure we work this in too. And I was like, good for Joe for having done deals like this before and knowing what was missing. Right. I was only focused on rewording what was there, not things that were completely not there. Right.
Yeah.
So proved to be
I,
very valuable in that process.
in a lot of the deals, especially in the service industry that I've done, I've worked with a lot of, in the 20 to 25 deals, that I've done, and I actually meant to look and count them before I got on this podcast, and I forgot, but I know it's somewhere between 20 and 25. And it's been of the three of the buyers have been prevalent without a lot of those deals. And so I've worked with, it's been the same attorney on the, on the side, on the buyer side for a bunch of those deals. Well, the three PE backed companies, three different attorneys, but it's been the same attorney, representing those buyers on each of those deals. And so now, because I've done so many deals with them, they will start with a like pre-negotiated form, which is very helpful in fees, right? Number
Yep.
one. And number two, I don't have to argue the same thing over and over again. It's a waste of time. Like, if they send me this agreement that they started with before, that we modified before, why do I have to ask for the same thing again? And I think that's a tribute to them too. Like, we've worked on deals, we've been able to work it out. That doesn't happen in litigation very much, right? Like, that's why I'm not a litigator. It's
Right.
so adversarial. I can be a bulldog, as you said, but I don't want to be a bulldog every second of the day. Like, it's just
Yeah.
that would get to me. But I
Sure.
think, like, I agree. Like, having done so much M&A in my life, I'm able to look at it and say, well, that's not there, that's not there, that's not there. Those are things that are very important.
Right. And I think the commonality, like when you go into these deals, like, Chad and I have been the buyer way more than we've been the seller, right? We don't like
Right.
to sell that much. We like to buy a lot.
Sure.
You realize like both parties have the same intention, right? Like the goal is to
Mhm.
get to the same ending spot where you can agree upon it. But I think sometimes we've been in that position where we're the buyer, and the way you write the deal or the way something is interpreted, they think like, oh man, you're trying to do something shady. Like, not at all. But like you said earlier, like the way things are written can be subjective, right? So it's
Mhm.
that letting the lawyers talk it out and figure out where the breakdown of communication was, like why that was written that way. It could be interpreted in a way that you'd be like, what the hell are they trying to pull here? When really you're not trying to pull anything. You just were coming at it from one perspective. And then you hear their perspective, you're like, ooh, yeah, we do need to rewrite that. That wasn't what we were trying to accomplish at all. So that's a
Right.
really important thing too, where it's not always that you have to be the hammer. Sometimes you just have to come in and say like, hey, let's talk about that a little bit. I don't think that we're interpreting that the same way you meant for it to be. And you were really good at that through the process too, because one thing I've learned, man, once you get two lawyers fired up against each other, it, it's hard for either one to bend. And I think you were very strategic in being able to say like, hey, let's slow down and talk about that one a little bit. Sometimes you can get more done with what's the saying? You catch more flies with honey than vinegar,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. No, I agree. I think that's it. I think if you make a reason, I think the best way to get what you want is to make a reasonable argument. I've always felt that. I think
Well,
that in baseball, I think that in law, I think that in everything. I think like you make a reasonable argument. Sometimes sometimes you're still not going to win, right? Like you make a reasonable argument and you just don't have the leverage to get what you want.
mhm.
But if you have the leverage to get what you want, you make a reasonable argument, you're going to get it 9 out of 10 times.
Well, and that is an awesome piece of advice right there because you've done this because this is probably like programmed in you as a lawyer. But
Hmm.
as I got older, I've thought about what is the reasonable argument, right? Like sometimes you'll emotionally react and then you start to
Yeah.
try to culminate, like you start putting together a reasonable argument in your mind. You're like, I don't think I got a leg to stand on here.
Right.
Like my emotional reaction doesn't trump the logic behind why this is the way it is. So sometimes it's that better to stay silent and let them think you're foolish than to open your mind or open your mouth and remove all doubt, right? So like slow down and think about what reasonable argument you could present before you open your mouth and look like a fool. Like
Yeah.
that saved me many times over the last 10, 15 years as I try to, like I said, prepare a reasonable argument. And I'm like, it's just not there. I'm glad I didn't say anything in the moment because at 25, I probably would have and would have looked foolish, right?
Yeah, I mean that's funny. We talked about the responsiveness time and getting back to people quickly. There are some times where you do have to slow down and not, you get an email that you don't like, and I get plenty of those. I get them every day. And you want to write back, and there are some lawyers. I make it a point that at the end of every deal that I close, sometimes you don't close, right? Like I've been fortunate that of all the deals I've started, I've closed 95% of them. You know what I mean? But like sometimes things happen and they don't close, and it is what it is. And you have arguments with lawyers during the course of it, or general managers during the course of a negotiation, and it frustrates you. But after a deal is done, I'd like to go back to them and say, listen, no hard feelings. We're good. I may have said some things you didn't like. You said some things I didn't like, but I know you hear it's not personal, it's business. Like literally, I have nothing personal against any of these people, right? Like I don't even know them personally.
Yeah, that's just not it.
So,
It's
yeah.
yeah. But do you coach? I know being in the sports world, the analogy, the 24-hour rule, right? So I
Yeah.
know a lot of coaches have the pre-parent meeting at the beginning of the season, like, hey, to exercise the 24-hour rule. We want to have an open dialogue and make you feel comfortable. Come to us, but not in the heat of the moment, not during the game. Do you encourage your players to do the same thing with their managers, their coaches? That hey, take 24 hours, cool off, process it, and then if it's still important to you, go find a coach. But I know in doing so, there's amazing how many times, and I try to do this, but I'm an emotional guy, so sometimes I break that rule. But it's amazing how many times 24 hours later, it's not even worth addressing.
Correct. Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be 24 hours. I think if you sleep on it, I think that's good enough, right? Like, but I think, there are plenty of times where, something's happened in a game or whatever, where, I get a call at 11 o'clock at night and, somebody's up in arms about something or whatever. And I'm like, listen, there's nothing we can do about it right now anyway. Like, I'm not going to call the GM at 11 o'clock at night over something like this. So let's just settle down. We'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll make a plan. We'll go from there. Because I think there are things like, that you just need to sit down and think about the appropriate thing because like in baseball when I'm doing a deal here's the difference, right? Like I talked about the similarities in the deals, but here's the difference when I'm doing a an acquisition or a legal deal. If you have the leverage, right? Like depending, is it an acqui-hire, is it a real deal, whatever, like if you have it, and you're also there's a buyer and there's a seller, and you're just dealing with one other side, right? In baseball, there are very, very few times where you have the leverage. Whereas in an acquisition, you have it a lot, right?
Yeah,
But in
what
because
would that rare case be when you have the stud that everybody
when you have
wants?
When you have a free agent, that's it. Like those are even, but even in arbitration, right? So like the way baseball works is you get to the big leagues. Sometimes you're up and down. Sometimes you stay up there. You have your pre-arbitration years where the team can control your salary. You can't even negotiate. They literally call me in February for these guys, Steven, to say this is what the salary is going to be, and I say, how did you get to that number? And they send me an email, and I say, okay. There's nothing you can do. I mean, there's a little something you can do, but it's not worth getting in on this. Then you get to arbitration when players have between 3 and 6 years of service time, sometimes two, depending on how much service time they have. The team can still keep you, but they can't set your salary anymore. So you negotiate a salary based on similarly situated players. You still have leverage depending on how good your player is, right? You can go to an arbitrator and the arbitrator can make a decision. But until this year, it's been very team friendly decisions. This year, actually, the players have won a lot more. It's been very recent. Like Scooble just won $32 million, which was like the easiest decision in the world,
But he's
right?
a
But
stud.
like, yeah, he's won two Cy Youngs, like the last two, right? So, but it's still not like leverage, right? Like if we're doing a sale of one of your businesses and you don't like how it's going, you can just walk away
Right.
and go to the next buyer, right?
You
You
have all the
can't do,
leverage.
Right. You can't do that in baseball unless you have 6+ years of free agent, unless you're a free agent. Now, when you're a free agent, especially if you're young, like 28, 29, and you have 15 suitors, the Dodgers have put a wrinkle into this recently, but like for the most part, if you have a lot of suitors, that's when you have the leverage and you can, set things up when you're a free agent. But it's a very limited time in baseball when you have that type of leverage that you do in a deal. So, like, the reasonable argument is really important, as I said, but the leverage is really important too, right? Because you can make a reasonable argument if you don't have any leverage, you're not going to, it doesn't matter how reasonable your argument is. Or if you have the leverage, you can make an unreasonable argument and you'll still get what you want because you have the leverage.
100%. And I love this conversation. I could talk about this all day because I think
Yeah,
deep
me
down
too.
inside, there was part of me that, had I not hated school so much, could have been an attorney because I love
Yeah.
like figuring out the angles and the negotiation piece, right?
Yes.
Like a sales guy is someone who didn't want to go to school long enough to become a lawyer sometimes, right? That
I think that's, but you're selling, we're all selling, right? Like you're
yeah,
selling. I mean, that's the thing. But I think like they don't teach you about leverage in law school. They don't really teach you about leverage in law firms,
right.
right? I think that's something you just need to learn. Like
It's all
how,
this back to the art of the deal though, right? Like if you've read
correct.
art of the deal, like you just mentioned like five main components of it, right? Like as far as leverage and what you have, like same thing in the sales world. That's a very similar concept. It's just learning how to apply it to accomplish what you want to. And then there's like rules that like blend into like medical, like do no harm, right? Like in the
Yeah.
sales world, there's way too many people that don't abide by the do no harm rule, which is a major component of the way I operate in business and sales. Like while sometimes you possess the skill to do the wrong thing, making sure that you never abuse that privilege that you have of being able to be charismatic or persuasive for the own promotion of self-interest or whatever, right? So,
Hmm.
but I know attorneys abide by many of those rules. The difference between you is you can be disbarred if you break some of those ethical guidelines.
Correct.
Sales
Yes.
guys can't be disbarred, so that's why we see so many cockroaches in that industry that bring down the title and name too. But that, my friend, is a topic for a different day.
Yeah.
So, one thing again, man, that I love about this podcast, Joe, is we talk about the good stuff, and people listen to the first 45 minutes and they hear about Joe, the sports agent who's had so much success, and Joe, the scholar, and Joe, the lawyer, and the corporate attorney. And every time I talk to you, like I said, I'm just so intrigued because you're like, I'm flying here, I'm going here, I'm meeting this guy, I'm heading up to spring training, I'm gonna swing down to Cancun for a couple of days with my wife and daughter while they're on spring break, right? Like, and it's such a appealing thing. You think like, oh man, everything is just going so great, but you and I already know better. Every day's not easy, and I know you have a couple really tough day stories that I look forward to hearing. So let's get into it, man. What is one of those really tough days that you've had, Joe?
So I'm going to give two stories. I'm going to give one when I got started and one when I got into when I was, really deep into my baseball business, right? So the first one is, and I want to preface this, and I talked a little bit about this before, Steve, just like kind of how I started, how I came up. But, I was so green. Like I graduated, I went to college graduated when I didn't turn 21 until September of my senior year. You know what I mean? So like I was young when I graduated high school. I went to college thinking I wanted to be a broadcaster. Realized I didn't want to be a broadcaster. I had a plan. I had a plan for law school and all of that. But I do think like when people ask me now, would you have taken some time to work between college and law school? I think I would have, just knowing what I know, because I think that would have made me a better lawyer originally. But whatever. We're past that. I'm 52 years old now. It's a long time ago at this point, right? So, you know, I graduated law school. The only jobs I had had, literally, were delivering pizzas for Domino's. I did that for a number of summers. I waited tables. I was the worst car porter at Enterprise Rent a Car in the history of Enterprise Rent a Car. Like I was so bad.
Don't
I'm
they
not a
make you do
great
that in suits? Don't you have to wear a suit?
No, I wasn't that. This was back, I don't know if you remember this about Enterprise, but like Enterprise used to pick you up at the airport. Remember they used to
Oh yeah,
advertise that,
they
right?
pick you up. Yeah,
Yeah, right. They used to advertise that. And so I'm in Syracuse, New York. I had to work. It was my senior year. I don't know why I did this. Like, look, why did I make this decision, right? I would have to go to like Erie Boulevard in the snow at like 5 a.m. It was awful. Like they paid well, right? That's probably why I did it.
they have a great
And
they have a great development program too. I've hired a couple
oh,
guys.
I
The
oh I
enterprise
bet
training program.
I bet they do. That's not what I was. That's
It,
not what
you
I
were
was
just
doing.
picking people. You were literally like Uber before Uber.
Correct. I was picking people up at the airport, and I was backing the car into the bay and washing the car. And I took off two side view mirrors, at least two. I'm not a good backer upper anyway. Now it's easy, right? With the
They
with
got the
the
cameras.
cameras,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But back then I was terrible at it. So like these were my only jobs. Like literally, they were my only jobs. When I was in law school, I interned for a football agent. I did summer at Testa Hurwitz before I worked there, but that was really it. So I went to Testa, I worked there, went to Golston, was there, and I said, all right, we didn't get the Red Sox, we didn't get the Celtics. I do want to have a sports presence and a practice, and I would like to do player rep. So I'm going to go on my own. The timing wasn't great. This was 2005. My first son, I have three kids. My first son was born in 2004. In 2004, I used to think I was like, I'm 5'6", and I used to think I was like the greatest basketball player in the world. I wasn't. But I played until I was older, not old, I mean, probably 40 or whatever. And I played in this league called the Never Too Late League. And I tore my ACL as like a 32-year-old, which is not fun. Like, you want to tear it as a 23-year-old? Cool. Like, not as a 32-year-old. So I have ACL surgery. I have my first son. And I'm like, all right, this will be a good time to start my own practice, right? So I didn't really know, like, I had no business experience, like, none of this, right? So I'm like, all right, well, how am I going to support myself? Because I had worked at two big law firms and they paid well, right? I mean, they did pay well. And so I'm like, all right, we lived in Needham, Mass. We're going to sell the house. We're going to move to another town that doesn't cost as much. We moved to Framingham. We hired a realtor, the same one that we used to buy the house in Needham, back then. And she gave us some not so great advice looking back on it. I don't blame her for it. It was like
This
no
is
one knew the mark.
2006, seven. You said
2005,
so. This is like
right?
three before the housing crash and the major economic downturn.
Correct. Yeah, but it was still bad. Like it still wasn't, right? And
Yeah.
so like we put it on the market. She told us a price to put it on the market. It didn't work. She thought it was going to sell like that, so we bought the second house
Oh boy.
right away.
Which
So
one?
we had two mortgages for 7 months with me starting a legal practice and a 1 year old, right? So I didn't know what to do. Like I was, and you say one tough day. I'm giving you 6 months of like tough days trying to figure this out. Now, luckily, my wife's father had some money and was able to help us out a little bit, which was good with this. But like talk about the anxiety and the angst and everything like this. And I was able to bring a couple legal clients over to me over, from Golston to me, but they weren't like great paying clients. In other words, they just didn't pay on time.
I
And
guess
one
as
of
they were the
them,
ones Golston was willing to give you because you probably
correct.
pretty locked out, non-compete, non-solicit, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, you can't do that at a law practice. But it
No.
wasn't. But it was. They were my clients, right? Like one was like a NASCAR guy. It was sports oriented stuff that I was able to like. I brought them in to Goulston, and Goulston was like, "Fine, that's fine. Like whatever, we don't care." And so we brought him. But like one wasn't a great paying one. Like he would pay a lot later than he should have, and everything. So I had 6 months of this angst when you know we were really, really struggling. And I didn't know. I was looking, I'm like, maybe this isn't the right decision. I have a partner. Chris Brown has been my partner in my law firm, and he's, worked as an agent a little bit. He's more of an entertainment lawyer, but we teach entertainment law together. He's a litigator and an entertainment lawyer. I'm a corporate guy, obviously, for the law practice. And Chris and I are buddies since law school. And he was struggling a little bit, but he didn't have two mortgages. So we're sitting there for 6 months, and we're like, all right, is this the right decision? And every night, like I just didn't sleep. I woke up. It was like this fight to get clients, and it was a struggle to get clients. And I remember at the end of the 6 months when we finally sold the house, and we sold it for a lot less than we thought we were going to sell it, or we hope a lot less than we hoped we were going to sell it. I think we broke even, which was fine. Honestly, I'm just give me the second mortgage, get it off. I only want to pay one mortgage. And when I was at Testa and Goulston, Steve, I wasn't a big acquisition guy. Like I did a few, but I wasn't like that wasn't my forte because like Testa was such a big venture fund firm, and they did a lot of IPOs and public company work. So that's kind of how I started. And Goulston actually recruited me to come over from Testa because they wanted to build this public company securities practice, and I had that experience, and so I did a lot of that. In the 8 years that I worked at Testa and Goulston, I probably did 3 deals, maybe four, but like it wasn't the way I operate now. And so at the end of that 6 months, I I got a deal, and that really helped. And that so I changed my focus from just being a baseball agent and like a general corporate lawyer to like, all right, here's something I'm really good at. Here's something that, pays well. And you can go deal to deal. And I realized at that time, and that kind of saved me from like, it made me realize when I got that first deal kind of 6 months in, that first acquisition, this is what I'm here to do, right? It wasn't just representing clients from the beginning. Like, I like that and I do that. And I have plenty of clients that does do that. But the deal was like really what got me going. But man, for those 6 months, I was looking at jobs in the law practice. I was looking at jobs outside outside of law. I'm like, I just
Calling
need to make money.
Domino's, seeing if Domino's is interested in.
Absolutely. I mean, I wasn't about like my wife had two jobs at times. Like it was a struggle. Now I know a lot of people struggle longer than 6 months, and I completely appreciate that. But having that 6 month struggle makes me realize now, like, if I have a bad month as a lawyer or a bad month as an agent where I'm not making the income that I'd like to make, I can deal with it a lot better now because of that 6 months that I went through.
Yeah, it better equipped you. I mean, it kind of defined the trajectory of the rest of your career and the way
It
that
did.
you diversified your business and the way that you definitely probably appreciated more things as they did get a little easier. Not that things are ever easy. As an entrepreneur, you constantly feel as though you're failing. That's that professional paranoia we talk about on almost every episode. But I'm sure now looking back, you're like, hey, it's way better now than it was during that 6 month period, even when you have one of those dry spells or a little bit difficult period of time, right? It's easier to appreciate the good times, I guess I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Um, and then you want me to get into the
I do. So I think about this one frequently, and I have a good friend, right? At some point, he'll be on the episode. I've done his podcast a couple times, who was a professional pitcher, played for the Guardians, Percy. And I know he's shared with me some of those stories of like his relationship with his agent and getting those tough phone calls and how easy it is, for him. 2016, he played for the Guardians the year they went to the World Series and lost to the
Mhm.
Cubs. Rollins Chapman shut down, right? But and then 2 years later, he was out of the league, right? And how quickly that pendulum swings. And I know you have a story you shared with me before about your player for Tampa. It's up to you if you want to share his name, but from hitting the game ceiling walk off, I think it was, right? So do you want to tell that story?
Well, that one, I could talk about that in general, but there's one other story I wanted to share with you, like, which I think people will appreciate, like in the sales business. But like what you're talking about is when a player's at the end of his career, how do you tell him?
Which
Right?
sometimes could be 2 years into their career. I mean, this is the crazy thing about the sports world, right? Like you could be a highly recruited, highly touted prospect, and two
Yeah.
years into your journey through double A, triple A, like it's over just like that, right? It's either an injury or something doesn't work out, right?
hmm So I have a lot of my, a lot of my former clients I still have really good relationships with today, right? Like one of my clients is, one of my clients when he played was Craig Albernaz, who he was the bench coach at Cleveland. He's now the manager of the Orioles, right? Antoine Richardson, who's the first base coach of the Braves now. I have two former clients who like work for me, and like those relationships are great. But I do have a lot of my clients that I don't like that fire me towards the end of their career because they don't feel that I'm working for them as hard. And I had two pitchers in December that are towards the end of their career probably, and they didn't think I promise you can't show them all the emails and texts and calls you're doing, right? Like you don't do that. But at the end of the career, it's hard to get jobs, especially if you've been out of affiliated baseball for an extended period of time. So I try to be very, very on. I will never tell a player you should retire. That's not for me to say. But I will be very, very honest and being very candid about the job opportunities. And baseball is very different now, Steve, than it was pre-COVID. It's very different, right? The draft is shorter. Teams have much smaller roster limits. It's just very, very different. Like, and, there's fewer minor league teams, right? Major League Baseball has made a point of contracting those, so there's just much fewer opportunities for a guy. So when you have that conversation, you have to be very careful, especially if it's with a guy that you really, really care about. You went to his wedding, whatever, and you have to have a conversation and say, listen, I believe you can still play because I do most of the time. I do, right? Like I believe they can still play, but in the current market, it's unlikely that I'm going to be able to get a job, and I'm very good at getting jobs. Like I am. I believe that. But sometimes it's very hard to do it. So you have to talk to them about, all right, what's the next stage of your career, right? Do you believe they're going to be a coach? Do you believe they're going to be a broadcaster? Do you believe they're going to do something outside of baseball? And at least start having those conversations. And it's a hard nut to crack a little bit because you don't want to bring it up too soon. And if you're bringing up too late, then you're too late. Right. So it's a very hard conversation to have. But I do think like of all like in my career, um, I've preserved the vast majority of players that I've represented, and I've preserved the players that I'm closest to. Like like you've had relationships with a lot of lawyers, a lot of employees. There's people you're closer to, there's people that you're not closer to, right? Sometimes the ones that you're closer to can end badly. It just happens. Like you don't want it to, but it does. I've been fortunate that the players I've been really close to, for the most part, there've been a couple. For the most part, those relationships have not ended badly. It's the players that I'm not quite as close to, just personality wise, whatever it is. Um, some of those relationships, I wouldn't say they've ended badly, but they fired me because I couldn't get them a job that they wanted to get.
And I get it. I mean, when you think about what you said earlier, right? Like this is business, it's not personal. Sometimes it feels personal, even though it is.
Mm-hmm.
But you take a little boy who maybe since he was 6 years old had this dream of playing in the league and either got close or did it for a little while. And now all of a sudden that dream is fleeting, right? And I think about it in terms of like a doctor who has to give a patient a terminal diagnosis, who's maybe cared for that patient and had him under, care for 10 years. Like, and now all of a sudden that patient just doesn't want to accept that diagnosis. So they say like, I'm going to go seek a second opinion or I'm going to go get a different doctor, right? Like I don't blame them. Like I get it. Like you're searching for hope at that point. You're clinging to any possibility. So if Joe Rosen can be the reason that they are getting the bad news and maybe they take one more stab with a different day, like I get it. Like you've had this dream for a long time. If you feel like I'm the one holding you back, then I'm sure you've told them like, go chase it, man. If you think somebody could put you in a better position now in your heart, you know,
Right.
nobody's going to do better. Right. And at some point they're going to find that out, but them chasing it one last time and making you the fall guy, like I'm okay with that. And you're right. There's been many situations where I've had to separate with coworkers over the last 20 years. Right. And oftentimes I'm the one that has to be the one that gives them the bad news. But my feelings are always the same when I leave that conversation. Very few times if I had regrets about the way it goes, I always attempt to let them leave with dignity.
Yeah,
But
sure.
it's like it's happening for a reason. You know, like it's not that I made a conscious, like I'm making a decision based off of the data that supports that decision or a gut instinct or some trend or pattern of behavior that I've seen in the past. Like I didn't just wake up that morning in a bad mood and decide to make a rash decision to separate an employee, right? Or a coworker.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's something that supports it. And I think back to what we talked about like very early in the podcast, just a lot of times people don't feel comfortable being honest and vulnerable in that moment. And I think in that moment, that's what's absolutely required. So when I
Mhm.
sit with someone who maybe was in a sales role or in a management position, it shouldn't be a surprise if you've managed through that process. So I think about it the same way for a sports agent. Like I'm sure that's not the first time you've told them that there's an issue, that there's a concern, right? Like, hey, I'm doing my
Sure.
best, but this is where we're at, right? And you're not getting 98 miles per hour anymore out of your fastball, and you've had a couple call ups and it hasn't panned out, so that makes teams a little reluctant to what offer you that second contract. Same thing in the workplace, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, we've had this issue with executing, we've had this issue with getting things down, we've diagnosed the process where it's falling through, we've tried to correct it, but at this point it's just not working, which would indicate to me that this probably just isn't a good fit, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it feels
Yeah.
personal. And it's again in your world, it's so much different because in most situations you fall into sales roles or you fall into business roles. It's not that like you had this dream of being an operations manager since you were 6 years old.
Sure.
Where in your world, it's just so different. I'll never forget, Joe. You'll like this story. I don't know if I've told you this one before, but a few years after Percy left the league and made the decision to retire, him and I went up to the Cleveland Guardians home opener. And he was all excited to go. We get there. We had a couple other guys with us, and we walk in, and he like goes down. He's talking to the first base coach, like over the fence.
Mhm.
I forget his name right now for the Guardians. He played
Okay,
um,
that's all right. Yeah.
Omar Vizquel, right?
I don't know who the first base coach is actually.
Yeah, yeah. You don't know all that? Come on, Joe.
No,
But
I don't know
anyway,
who the first base coach is. No. Yeah.
I catch him like in a moment, like before they throw out the opening pitch, and he's standing up there, and he's kind of like, I can like see it in his face. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, no, you don't get to do that, man. Like you gotta do what every kid dreams of doing, even if it was for a short period of time. So you don't get to sit here as the 0.0.1% that did it and get to feel sorry for yourself because you're not still doing it, right? Like
Right.
every little kid got to grow up dreaming of pitching on that mound, and you actually did it. Like it's an awesome memory. You should not be sad about the fact that it's not there anymore. And it just so happens that you're put in that tough position where you've got to deliver that news on many occasions. And man, that's gotta suck. I can't even imagine what that would be like.
It's really hard. I'll tell you the flip side when you get fired by someone that you shouldn't get fired by, and then it really hurts. And like this was sort of the second piece that I wanted to talk to you about. So I'm not gonna mention the player's name on this, but people who know me know who it is. Um, so I've been a lawyer for 30 years. I've been an agent for about 20, a little over 20. I've had 4 first round picks, which is pretty good, for a smaller firm, right? I got introduced to a kid in the summer of 2020, which we all remember the summer of 2020, right? I'm out on a baseball field in a mask, fist bumping, like, pinky bumping, the whatever, right? And I like left-handed pitchers. I've always liked left-handed pitchers. When I recruit, because I don't recruit that many players, Steve, I tend to be focused on. I will recruit some right-handed pitchers. And my best player right now is one, but I I recruit a lot of left-handed pitchers. I recruit a lot of shortstop, center fielder, like middle of the order, middle of the field players, right? Like because those guys have a higher success rate. They do. Um, and so this kid was a left-handed pitcher. He's from high school up here, and he was only throwing 85, 86 miles an hour. But he went to a high school where I knew the coach. I had a player from there before, and they were almost recruiting me. Okay. So I look at him. He's 6'4", could really spin a curveball, wasn't throwing super hard. Figure, all right, he was a junior in high school. He's probably going to go to college. Every kid up here goes to college. You know, they very rarely get drafted out of high school, and he'll be fine. So I take him on. I mean, I'll take you're 6'4" lefty throwing 87. I'll take you, like, you know, like I'm in. Early, right? Like if you're throwing 87, if you're throwing 87, you know, when you're in the big leagues. Although I represented Wade LeBlanc his whole career, he threw 87 in the big leagues for 14 years. But you know, if you're throwing 87 in high school, I'm good, right? So I get him with a strength coach that I know very well. I get him with a travel baseball team for a fall, you know, that I know very well. He goes out there, he trains, he does his thing. The velocity goes from 85, 86 to like 91, 92. Fast forward to the spring, I think we got a shot here. Like he's developed a lot in the last 5 months from the help that I provided him, and we got a shot here. He goes out, first game, there's like 12 scouts there. He's up to 92. He then, over the course of the season, now this is the spring of 2021. If you remember, you couldn't go to college baseball games then. Like some scouts were able to, but I couldn't go to a college baseball game then because COVID, it was still shut down, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it was the high school games were the only thing that I went, and so he, you know, he lived close to me, and I would drive down and I would go to just about every one of his single games, and he threw three straight no hitters, and he got up to 94. About a month, no one knew. I was the only agent who knew this kid, right? Like you know, in the summer of 2020, and I was the only one who like even knew who he was. And I did take a chance because he wasn't what he,
He's on
right?
everybody's radar.
Yeah, he ended up right. So now guys are starting to talk to him as like a talk about him. Scouts are as like a second, third round, maybe late first round pick, right? Like that type of guy. And he wants to sign. He's more interested in signing. You know, he doesn't want to go to college really, and especially if he's that high round to pick. So I take a trip down. I had a first rounder in 2020 as well. I take a trip down to see him play in the minor leagues, and then I'm having lunch with another player, a double A player around Philly, and I get a call, and I'm at lunch, and I'm walking in the lunch, and it's the mother of the player saying, "We're thinking about leaving you to go with another agency." This is before lunch, so I got to sit in lunch with this guy with this on my mind, right? Like, and that sucked. Like that was terrible. And I'm like, all right, all I did, and now this big agency comes in and tries to take him from me. And so I leave lunch. I cut lunch short. I had to. He understood. I mean, he did. He understood. Because I had to tell him because I wasn't all there, right? Like, you know, like, right? I wasn't all there.
Yeah.
I leave lunch. I drive back. His house is actually on the way to my house, like from where I was in Philly to my house in Boston, like it was on the way. So I stopped there. The kid wasn't there. It was the parents. And I talked the parents out of leaving. I did. I think I did. They didn't leave. So I talked about it, right? So this is on a Friday, I think, or a Saturday, whatever. So the next day I wake up, I get a call from the dad, we're leaving. Literally, I talked him out, and then the next day they get a call from leaving. I spent that whole day talking to them on the phone, trying to talk them out of it, and eventually I did again, and they stayed. He ended up being, now people will know who he is, they can look it up, but it's okay. He ended up being the 7th overall pick in the entire draft. I got him a lot of money. I fly down, I go to the draft party, my partners are there, everything's great, whatever. And I'm like, all right, I'm over this. I got through it. He ended up being, you know, that's the highest draft pick I've ever had, 7th overall. And a month later, I get a call from the parents.
I knew it was
Thank you. Appreciate it. We're gonna go to this big agency now. I mean, I got my commission and all that, right? But Steve, I've married my high school girlfriend, right? So like I've been with Mary, my wife, since 1990. We started dating in 1990, right? And I've never, I mean, I had breakups before that, but I was in high school. They're irrelevant. You know what I mean? Like they're irrelevant, whatever. And my wife and I, we broke up a couple times before we got together. But it's been a long time since I've really like been broken up with. Like this felt
This
like
was
I was engaged and my fiance was like, "See you later. I'm going with The Rock." Right? Like that's like what it was, right? Like I met Brad
you kind
Pitt.
of look like a miniature rock.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. I met The Rock. I'm going with him. And it was like right? And so look, I love what I do for a living. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who work to work. I don't, right? Like I love what I'm doing and there are so many parts of the legal side that I love. There's so many parts of the baseball side that I love. I love teaching as much as anything, even though that doesn't really, pay the bills that much. But I love that part too. And I love going to debuts and I love going, I love negotiate. I love doing arbitrations and free agencies and draft contracts and all of that. But man, the pain that day
Yeah.
when I got fired by a player that I helped make. He did the work. I'm not pitching,
But did
right?
they ever did they
But
ever give you a reason? I'm just curious. Like, did they say like we think you should have went fourth? Like, was there
no, no, it had nothing they were happy with the deal. They
like you
told
got
me
us
that
here,
they
but
were
we felt
happy
like
with the deal. I think
somebody
it
else?
was more about now the future, the marketing opportunities and stuff like that. No, he was drafted by a mid-market team. I would have gotten him a baseball deal, shoe deal, all that kind of stuff. I actually had a glove deal by the day we had the draft party. So like I had all that stuff worked out. But I think they just wanted to be under the lights, for lack of a better term. And
I get it.
yeah,
How's he
I
done
get
since?
it.
How's he done since? I'm curious. Like from a
Not great. Not great, but he's so young. I'm sure he'll be fine. And they are a really good family. I don't fault the kid. I wish he would have gotten because he was 18 at the time. Like he was really young. He was 17 when he got drafted. Actually, no, he had just turned 18 when he got drafted. I don't really fault the kid that much. I really don't because he was so young. Like I remember me at 18. You probably remember you at 18. Like you weren't making the greatest decisions, right? And I just wish the parents would have, I don't know, like it was really hard. And I tell when I speak a lot in sports law classes and entertainment law classes and stuff, and I tell this story. I don't tell this story to talk people out of being an agent if they want to be an agent. If you want to be an agent, go be an agent. If you want to go be whatever you want to be, go be whatever you want to be. I'm not going to tell you to do it or not do it. I'm certainly not going to tell you not to do it because when I became an agent and I asked people about it, they're like, you shouldn't do it. And I kind of got upset. That made me want to do it more, right? Like because people told me that I couldn't do it and whatever. But there are really hard days. It's not all glamorous. In fact, most of it is not glamorous. And like those hard days are, and you're constantly worrying. When I do an acquisition, in all the years of doing an acquisition, I've only been fired once in the middle of the acquisition. And that client was crazy. Like legit, legit. I couldn't, there's no way I could have closed that deal. I don't even know if the deal closed, Steve. Like it was a shit show. Like it was a mess. Like, and she didn't listen to me. Like it was awful. 30 years won. But I am constantly worrying on my baseball players that if I'm not doing this right or I'm doing that or whatever, like, because you can't read minds, that I'm going to be let go. And I thought I had turned the corner with them after they were drafted so high and got so much money that I was good. And then a month later, I'm out. And it sucked.
Yeah, that and you know what? That's an awesome story. I appreciate you sharing that one, and it's so relevant to business owners, entrepreneurs, coaches, whoever else is listening. Right? That sometimes you could do everything right, and it still doesn't work out. And
Hmm.
you can do one of two things when that happens. You can either use it as an opportunity to be discouraged and make excuses, which is that victim mindset that we talked about on this podcast, or you can use it for motivation. Which I
Yeah.
know you. I know what type of person you are. I'm sure you use that as an opportunity to self-evaluate maybe things you could have done differently, self-reflecting on that fact that everything you did wasn't perfect, right? And it
Hmm.
probably changed some processes and some ways you manage the players that you did still have moving forward, right?
It definitely did. I will say this, that this happens as you get older too, right? So like I started as an agent when I was 32. I'm now 52, right? At the beginning, most of my relationships were with the parents. And now, even with the players that I represent in high school, that I advise in high school, I talk to the parents. I do. I have to, right? For the kids in
Yeah.
high school. And some of the guys in college too, and even some of the pro guys. But I need my main relationship to be with the player. And I also realized that I had scouts call me after they heard I got fired by this player and were like in shock because I did do a really good job. There have been times where I haven't done as good of a job and maybe I deserved to be fired and I wasn't, right? But in this situation, I did it. I put him in all the right. My job is to provide opportunities and to put him in the right spots and things like that. And I did all that, right? And I got him to the team that was drafting the highest, and I got him the most money he could get, and things like that. And scouts called me afterwards and were like, "Man, like I'm really sorry. Like I don't know." But sometimes, and I'm not saying I was perfect. I don't know. There's probably reasons in their minds, especially now, 5 years later, that I don't know about, right? But you can do a job great or what you think is great, and it still doesn't matter. So I think like you got to work as hard as you want to work. You got to keep doing the thing. You know what I mean? You got to have the ambition you want to have. You got to do what you do, and you want to keep getting better. Obviously, like I definitely want to keep getting better as I progress at this job. Like I'm still young, but sometimes you can do what you think is perfect, and you can still get fired. So
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, yeah, and back to my earlier point, you just got to use it as motivation. Again, it's a great
Hmm.
opportunity to self inspect, self reflect, make modifications, and then become better because of it. Right. So those are great stories. I appreciate the 6 month tough day story.
Yeah.
Most of them are multiple days they string in, and I'm sure even that while that was one tough day, the day you got the phone call after convincing them 2 or 3 times not to
Yeah.
leave. There were many tough days and weeks after that as you went through that self-evaluation process and getting those phone calls from those agents who are like, what the hell happened, Joe? You're like, I don't want to talk about this right now, probably, right?
No, and you think about you're like, do I belong in this business? Should I still be an agent? If I can't keep this kid, like what am I doing? Right? Like those types of things. And it's like, I don't know, I mean, imposter syndrome, I guess, right? Like sometimes I don't know how else to call it. I don't think it's that necessarily, but like there are some times where I'm like, is this the right thing? And it is. Like I'm doing the thing that I was meant to do and I believe that I should be doing and I do love it. I love the fact that I love what I do,
Yeah.
right? I don't think that I could be the type of person that just works to work. Like and most people do that, and that's fine. Like that's totally fine, right? They have the work, they have their life, they're completely separate.
Yeah.
There are times when I'm with my wife where I have to answer a phone call. She's not super happy about it. I think at age 52, she understands a little more than she did at 32, but it's fine. Um, but it's what I've chosen and what but I do love my job. But there are thing is like, and I'm sure Steve, you're this way. I don't. Someone could call me up and you remember 2 months ago when I said this to you or when this happened. I'm like, I don't remember, and I have to go look in the document or whatever. When I went through that double mortgage thing, I remember like that was
Yeah.
20 years ago, and I remember I
Well,
remember how I feel.
pain scars a little deeper, right? You
It
feel that
does.
deeper than the good stuff. You're like me. The wins are fleeting, but you
Yep.
remember the learning moments much deeper.
Absolutely.
I think when you think about the psychology behind leadership development and things like that, like people have labeled me as arrogant. You've known me for a year. I think you would know, like, I
No.
don't consider myself arrogant. Now, people want to say I'm arrogant. I own it. I'm like, that's fine. I am a very confident individual, but I'm
Hmm.
confident and calculated, meaning like I do the research as I read through 40-page contracts. I'm chat GPTing things. I'm Googling, like I'm not just coming up with these irrational opinions about things, right? Based on my own lack of knowledge. But I think and you've had the opportunity to interact with a lot of business owners, leaders, good and bad. When I think of arrogance, I think the formal definition is like an over assessment or something like that, an over evaluation of one's own self worth or something like that,
Hmm.
or one's knowledge of something. And that's where I'm like, I don't feel like I'm arrogant because I'm willing to admit what I do and don't know. And I'm willing to go seek the advice of people who do know way more about me in that particular field, or Google it or chat GPT it or whatever it is. But to me, arrogance comes when you think you know the most about everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I bring this up to bring this podcast full circle. So we got to bring it in here. I think one thing that I hope to inspire for those that listen to this podcast is you have to build out, if you want to be successful in life, and this was a pivotal moment for me, you have to build out this incredible network of knowledgeable people who are very specialized in what they do. And I was so happy to meet you a year ago because it just eased the burden of like, hey, I really need to dissect every single part of this deal. I wanted to be involved. You saw that. I was,
Mm-hmm.
on every call and doing every part of due diligence, supplying lists, vetting everything. But at the same time, I had this piece knowing that Joe Rosen was in charge of it. And, we have, you got to meet and interact with our accounting team. Like we have a phenomenal accounting team, right? And we have a phenomenal local attorney fee and real estate attorneys. And that's what gives me confidence that sometimes could get mistaken as arrogance, but it's not confidence in myself necessarily. It's confidence in my ability to assemble an extremely awesome network of professionals. And if you're arrogant, sometimes you don't do that. And I would encourage anyone who's listening, and I credit you, Joe, and my network of people all the time. Like when they say, like, why have you guys been so successful? Because we have an incredible team. And that sounds cliche and it sounds cheesy, but it is so, so, so true. You have to have an incredible team. And not everyone's someone that we contract out like you, Joe. Sometimes those teams are right here within our own four walls, people who work with us. And my wife, she's a saint at home. She keeps me so balanced. She's part of my network. She's part of my team. Sometimes we don't think of our spouses that way. But she has become that for me. And the one piece of advice that I think you would probably reiterate to folks who are listening is, man, you have to build out your team of people who are very good at what they do, people who you can trust, who are like-minded, but also so gifted in different ways that can bring value to the table. And that just allows you to scale and build so much faster than trying to do it all on your own. Wouldn't you agree?
100%. I wouldn't call you arrogant at all. I think you have to be confident in order to have the success that you've had, and I think that's impressive. But the arrogant would be if you and I had a conversation during it, during the deal, and I said, "Hey, Steve, I've done hundreds of these deals. Here's what it should be," and you say, "No, I've done one deal. This is how I'm going to make that." That's arrogant, right?
Yeah,
and that's not how you work, right? And there have been,
I have. No, you've done hundreds of these deals. I've only done two. What should we do,
right.
Joe?
Exactly. But I think those are the best clients that I have, are the clients that come in and you want to be involved. You have to be involved, right? Like you have to be involved because you're preparing the disclosure schedules. I'm not, like those types of things.
Oh,
But
don't say that
let
word.
you, I know, if you let me do my job, right? Some CEOs don't let me do my job. If you let me do my job, I'm going to do a good job. And I promise, I promise people I'll do a good job for you if you let me do my job. And you want to be involved. I need you involved, but focus on the points, focus on the important things, not these things that are not going to matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And by the way, it hit me as we were talking. I gave the ridiculous answer of Omar Vizquel as the first base coach. It's not. It's Sandy Alomar.
Sandy Alomar. There you go. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
I wish I knew. The only first base coach I know is Antoine Richardson of the Braves because he was my client. That's the only first base coach I know. I probably should know more.
And they turn over a lot. We've had Sandy for a long time, though, so we should have known that one. But yeah, Vizquel, terrible answer. Well, thank you, Joe. Thanks for being part of my circle, man. Those texts mean a lot to me. Keep them coming, please. Don't. I think we got more deals we're going to be doing together on the horizon, and
for sure,
I'm excited to be able to work through those details. So it's a no-brainer for me, who will represent me in any sort of M&A stuff going forward. So grateful to have found you, grateful to have had you today, and grateful for your vulnerability and sharing those stories. That life's not always perfect. Sometimes when you have been a high achiever, such as yourself, there have been many tough days, and sometimes even 6-month tough day periods. But we get through them, we learn from them, and we grow. So thank you for that. And anyone who is interested in joining me for the One Tough Day podcast, shoot us an email, give me a phone call. Most of you, I'm easy to find. My cell phone's everywhere, right? Reach out. I love having these conversations, and I've received such great feedback so far on the podcast after just our first few guests. And we look forward to continuing to bring more incredible people like Joe to the table so that we can all learn and grow together as leaders, coaches, mentors, business leaders, whatever it is. If you're here, then that means you have interest in getting better and learning from some other people who have already learned some valuable lessons. So thanks for joining. And until next time, thanks for joining One Tough Day podcast.